Hi everybody, I'm Athena and welcome back to Finding Flow podcast. This podcast is all about inspiring women to become the healthiest and happiest versions of themselves that they can possibly be. Join me each week as we talk about all things to do with women's health, nutrition, periods, hormones, mindset, and all of that good stuff. If you enjoy the podcast and you find it really helpful, then I would absolutely love for you to support me by leaving me a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and also a rating on Spotify. Hi everybody and welcome back to Finding Flow podcast. Today I wanted to cover a really important subject, and that is the effects of not having a period. And I'm talking about the short-term and the long-term effects. Sorry if my voice is a bit croaky in this episode. I've been a little bit ill over the past few days. It was really weird because there was one day where I felt so ill and my throat felt like it had been rubbed with sandpaper. That was for one day and one night. And I had such an awful sleep on that night. But then the day after, my throat was still a bit sore, but it's not been anywhere near as bad as that random one day where it felt like someone had been sandpapering my throat. But I still have a bit of a croaky voice, so I hope that that's not annoying in this episode. I probably should have waited till my voice got a bit better before I recorded, but whatever. We're recording now, so we're just going to roll with it. So in today's episode, I wanted to cover all of the effects of not having a period because there are a lot of them. A lot of these things that I'm going to mention today, you might know based on the fact that you're listening to this podcast, so you're probably interested in women's health. You might have done your own research. You might have experienced hypothalamic amenorrhea yourself or PCOS yourself, and you might have experienced all of the horrible symptoms that come along with not having a regular period. But if you haven't experienced these things, or you actually have no idea what it can actually do to your body if you don't have a period, then this episode might be quite interesting for you. So the effects of having no period. Now, I always preach on this podcast and on the podcast, if I'm ever a guest on someone's podcast and it's about health, I will always be saying how important it is to have a period. And I say this to people in my real life and they're probably thinking, shut up, we get it. But I can't emphasize enough how important having a period is. And it's not just having a period, it's everything that comes with having a period. So I'm basically talking about having well-balanced hormones, because all of the effects that I'm going to talk about in this episode are caused by the imbalances in hormones that are associated with not having a period. Hormones are incredibly important in the body, and even if just one of them is out of balance, then it can really, really affect so many different things in your body, an unbelievable amount of things. Let's just get straight into the effects of not having a period. So I think there's not really going to be any particular order with these. I'm just going to sort of roll through them and explain them a little bit, but no one is worse than the other. They're all pretty bad, and they're all things that are warning signs. The body is basically giving you a warning sign to say something's not right, something needs to change, because we don't feel safe and because I don't feel safe, I don't feel comfortable right now. So it's kind of giving you those warning signs to change something or multiple things in your lifestyle to overcome these hormonal imbalances, get your period back and be healthy again. So the first one is actually a symptom that is something that you can experience whether you have a period or not, whether you have balanced hormones or not. It's something that everybody's going to relate to, and that is fatigue, exhaustion, low energy, all of that kind of thing. Obviously, there are many things that can make you tired. There are a lot of things that can burn you out, like the modern day lifestyle. We're all working so much more. There's a lot more stresses and pressure, and that can lead to low energy. But if you don't have a period, it's very likely that you're going to be very low in energy pretty much all the time, no matter how much sleep you get, no matter how much you try and relax, no matter what your responsibilities. no matter whether you're exercising or not, you are going to be low on energy. And that's just the way it is, because the hormones that are low when you don't have a period are the ones that provide you with energy. They're important for energy metabolism. When you don't have a period and your reproductive hormones are out of balance, it can actually affect your thyroid hormone functions as well. And the thyroid hormones are very, very important when it comes to energy levels. So the next symptoms are brain fog and memory loss. And this is something I can relate to a lot, because these are symptoms of an eating disorder as well. And since I've had an eating disorder, even since I've been recovered, my memory is still so awful, and I get very, I can so easily just lose concentration. And I always joke to people that I have dementia, because honestly, you'll tell me something and I'll just completely forget it 2 minutes later. And if someone asked me what I did last week, I would just have no idea. I even now, when I sort of have my cycle back, even though it's still not really, really regular, but I have a cycle and I'm eating enough, I'm not over exercising, I still get brain fog and memory loss. So again, that can be a symptom of something else. That might just be me overworking or just having a lot going on, but it's definitely something that people with no period will experience for sure. Next, you have poor mental health. So anxiety, depression, just feeling really stressed, feeling wired all the time. Again, it comes down to the hormonal imbalances. When you have very low estrogen and progesterone, it can actually impact your mental health, and there are studies that have shown this. There's a lot of research that suggests there is a really close link between mental health and, reproductive hormone levels, especially if you aren't having a period because you are over-exercising or you are under-eating. Those two things can also impact your mental health quite a lot as well, and can cause you a lot of anxiety. The next one is feeling cold all the time. Again, this is very closely linked to thyroid issues. So if you have low thyroid levels, then you are probably going to feel cold all the time, because the thyroid hormones are very important in regulating your temperature. But being cold is a really common thing amongst those with no period and also those with eating disorders. No matter how many layers you put on, you feel like you just can't get warm. You have really bad circulation, so your hands are fucking freezing and numb all the time. I remember I used to have to wear gloves in the house when I was younger because, it was when I was 14 or 15. A part of that would have been because I had very, very low body fat percentage because of my eating disorder, but part of it would have been because I had no period and my hormones were very, very low. So I'd literally be walking around with gloves on in the house, which is kind of funny to think about, but also kind of sad. The next symptoms I'm going to kind of group together, and that is having really thin hair, having brittle nails, and having dry skin. All of these are very closely associated with low progesterone in particular, as opposed to some of the other hormones. Another really key symptom, and this is one that I experienced, but I always put it down to drinking a lot of water and drinking a lot of coffee, but it's actually probably because of my hormonal imbalances. But I pee quite a lot. And even to this day, I pee a lot, but I do drink a lot. So I'm just is it because of that or is it because of my hormones? But when you have low estrogen levels, basically estrogen is required it helps to build up the bladder muscle. So the smooth muscle that surrounds the bladder, estrogen helps to build up that muscle and make it stronger so that you're less likely to feel the need to pee. Whereas when you have low estrogen, it's not helping to thicken and strengthen the bladder wall. So you might drink a tiny, tiny bit of water, and as soon as your bladder starts to fill up, you might feel like you need to pee. And that's a really common symptom when you don't have a period. But I think it's quite a funny one because it's not really one that many people talk about. And I think that's because I guess it does depend a lot on how much you drink as well as your hormone levels. The next one is again associated with mental health, and this is feeling really emotional and really, sort of fragile. I remember when And again, this is probably partly from my eating disorder as well as my hormonal imbalances, but when you don't have a period, it can really make you very sensitive to emotions, or like, I don't know how to describe this. So I used to be very, like, my emotions were very, very up and down. They were very extreme. So I would either feel really, really, really happy, which was very rare, to be honest, for me in my teenage years, but there would be the odd time where I'd feel really happy. It was so unnecessarily extreme. Or like if one little thing made me angry, like I was so angry, and that was like all I could think about. And it's really unhealthy to be like that. And I know that is that's a symptom of a lot of different mental health conditions, but it's definitely something that you might experience if you don't have a period. You might notice that you're very emotional. You might get night sweats if you don't have a period and your hormones are imbalanced, especially if you are going through recovery. And say if you've gone through a period where you've really undereaten and you've over-exercised and you've lost your period, when you start to like eat more and reduce your exercise, this is when you're probably going to experience night sweats. And I think a lot of this is down to your metabolism slowly increasing once again because you're feeding it more and you're letting your body rest. That increases your metabolism, and as a result, you're going to start to sweat a bit more. I remember some nights when I was going through like the start of my recovery, I would literally wake up drenched. Like I used to have to get up in the middle of the night and like wash myself because I was drenched, and it's not very nice to think about, I know, but that is the reality of going through recovery. Sometimes you wake up and you're soaking wet and you have to go wash. That's just the way it is. But we do this to get our periods back, don't we? The next one is insomnia. That kind of relates to what I just said actually, but you're probably going to wake up quite a lot of times in the middle of the night, whether that is because you are drenched in sweat or whether that is because you need the toilet because you have a weak bladder. Maybe you're hungry because you're not eating enough. There's so many reasons why, and sometimes it's literally just you're waking up and you don't know why it is the case. You are just waking up. And again, it's down to hormones. And why did I say it like that? It's down to hormones and just everything being out of whack, basically. Your whole body is just out of whack and it's giving you all of these warning signs. And one of those is sleep. I think a lot of that might be down to like evolution. So I guess when we were, back in the day, in the caveman days, if you hadn't eaten enough, your body would probably not let you sleep and rest because it's like we could die if we don't eat soon. So you're not sleeping, you're getting up and hunting for food. Maybe it's because of that, I'm not too sure. Another key thing when you don't have a period, particularly if the reason you don't have a period is because you are undereating or you have been undereating over the last however long, is cravings. Now, you might experience cravings, you might not. You might crave chocolate bars, you might crave fruit. Cravings is really, really subjective, and it's something that isn't necessarily going to be the case for everybody. But you might notice that as you start to eat a bit more and you go through your recovery journey to try and get your period back, you might notice that you are really, really craving a particular food, a particular group of foods. You might just be craving more food in general. And it's all linked back to the fact that your metabolism will be speeding up. Your body is slowly trying to switch on your reproductive function once again. And to do that, it needs food. So it's gonna make you crave food. In particular, you're probably going to start craving carbs because carbs are really important for reproductive function, especially when you are turning back on that reproductive function. And carbs are the thing that a lot of women restrict. So it's, if you are getting a lot of carb cravings, then listen to them. And yes, it might be scary to eat more carbs and think, oh, I'm going to gain weight. But a lot of the time it's necessary if you do want to get your period back. The next one is loss of lean muscle mass. And this is, I guess, more associated with not having a period for a long period of time. So several months or years. It's definitely something I experienced, and it's actually why I got into the gym in the first place. It's why I started weightlifting, because I had lost so much muscle because I'd been so underweight and so malnourished for several years. And when the body's malnourished, it starts to break down your body fat and it uses that for energy. And then when it has no body fat left, it'll start to use muscle. It'll break down your muscle tissue for energy, because if you're not feeding it enough, the body's going to look at the various organs and tissues and think, where can we pull energy from? Because we don't have enough to live right now. And it's a survival mechanism, and there's nothing we can do about it. It's inbuilt in our DNA. But unfortunately, if you are malnourished for a long period of time, you can expect some loss of muscle mass, and that is just because the body is trying to get energy from whichever source it can. So I guess loss of muscle mass is not a very obvious symptom for a lot of people. Especially if you've not had your period for like just a few months. You might not experience very much muscle mass loss, or if you do, it might not be very noticeable. But the good thing about this is that if you start going to the gym and weightlifting after you've recovered, or at least towards the end of your period recovery, you can then build back some of this muscle. Well, actually, I want to point out, you can build back the skeletal muscle that you've lost. But if you've been malnourished for several years, you can actually lose, or there can be atrophy, so like breakdown of some of the cardiac muscle, so the muscle around the heart, and there isn't really very much you can do about that. Yeah, we're not going to go too much into that because that's a whole subject in and of itself, but you can definitely build back skeletal muscle mass. Another really common symptom when you don't have a period is digestive issues. A lot of the time this is due to being malnourished or having gone through a period of restrictive eating, and then when you start eating more to try and get your period back, it can really be quite intense on your digestive system, and it can cause a lot of discomfort, a lot of bloating. Your body starts to hold on to more water, and it can be really uncomfortable to deal with, but it's definitely something that a lot of women do experience when they're trying to get their period back. And the final symptom that I will quickly talk about is being ill all the time. So when you don't have a period, you're actually much more prone to getting illnesses, getting the flu, other illnesses, infections, that kind of thing. You're also more injury prone, because estrogen has very protective effects on basically the whole body, and if you have low estrogen levels, you are going to be more prone to getting ill and injured. There isn't really that much you can do about it apart from try and get your period back, really, and just stay as safe as you can. If you are going to the gym, don't lift too heavy weights because you might be at risk of injuring yourself. Don't do anything crazy, jumping off buildings, the usual day-to-day things that you probably do. Don't do those because you might injure yourself. I mean, anybody could injure themselves doing that, but especially if you don't have your period. In terms of staying free from illness, I guess it's just about keeping distance from people if they are ill themselves. We all know about that after the past 2 years of social distancing, but I'm just going to reiterate that here. Basically, those are the symptoms of not having your period. There's probably so many more that I could think about, really. Oh, actually, I'm just going to quickly tag this one in the end because this is an important one and it is one that I forgot about, but low libido. That is such a key one when it comes to not having a period. You probably won't want to have sex. Like, estrogen is the sex driver. It's the hormone that makes you want to have sex. It's the hormone that makes you horny around ovulation, because your body is like, we're about to ovulate, that egg is going to be released, we want you to have sex so that a sperm can fertilize this egg that we're about to release. The body is doing everything it can to get that egg fertilized, so it's making you hornier so you want to have sex. If you don't have estrogen, but if you have very low estrogen, you're probably not going to want to have sex, or if you do, it's probably not going to be as much as you would if you had normal estrogen levels. Obviously, libido is very subjective, and it's one person might just naturally have a low libido, whether they have a period or not, whether they have normal estrogen or not. Others might have a really high libido, even with low estrogen. But you will experience an increase in your libido when you do start to slowly get your period back and your estrogen starts to rise to a normal level. So that's just something to look forward to when you recover your period. So that is the end of this episode. So many different factors and symptoms of not having a period that are really important, and they're all very uncomfortable and not very nice symptoms to experience, but they're also huge warning signs that something is wrong. Your body is telling you that something is not right. And especially if you are experiencing a combination or all of what I said today, it's because you don't have a period. It's because your reproductive hormones are out of balance, and you definitely need to do something about it if that is the case. I hope this episode was helpful, and if you enjoyed, I'd love for you to leave me a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. If you want to listen to the episode on YouTube, then I'm now uploading everything onto YouTube, so you can just head over there. Just type in Finding Flow Podcast and it should pop up. Follow me over on Instagram at Finding Flow Podcast, and I will see you in the next episode.